Hey, John Morris here with howtomakemywebsite.com, and in this video we're going to talk about security. So one of the biggest things that you're going to run into as a developer is security, whether you're dealing with forms or just other parts of your site, but especially when it comes to forms, because forms you're accepting user-generated data, and that means that someone who has bad intentions can try and enter data into your form that will mess with your code, mess with your database, try to gain access to your database, and so on. So in this video, we're going to talk about some of the things that you can do to help with security. So a couple of the things right off the bat when you're working with a database is every database has a user that is able to access that database. So, and again, when we set up our config file, you'll notice that we have our database name, we have the user, and we have the password. And then not only does each database have a user that can access it, but that user is given certain capabilities or things it can do within, and those are called privileges. Okay, so again, there's a number of things that you can do just off the bat that can allow you to make your site more secure. So some of the obvious things are when you're naming your database and your database user and your password, because you get to select all of that to make those things obscure. You don't want something that's going to be easily guessed. You want to make sure it's unique for every one of your databases so that if someone gets access to one, they don't get access to all. Make it hard to guess, things like that. So things that you do every day with passwords and usernames that you create. But it's especially important here because you're talking about your server, you're talking about data. It could be very sensitive data that people are trying to get their hands on. So if you're like me, you don't necessarily always have every password as obscure and secure as it could be for other stuff. But when it comes to these passwords for your databases, your database user, the names, all that stuff, you really need to take the time to make these something obscure, make them hard to guess, make them unique, make them random, and put a little bit of effort in there, because I mean you're only gonna have to enter it once anyway, so you might as well take the time to do it, and it's really gonna go a long ways as far as making your database secure. Beyond that, we talked about the privileges for each user. And if we head over here to the MySQL reference manual, we're here looking at the privileges provided by MySQL. You can scroll down and you can see that these are all of the different privileges that a user can have. Okay, so obviously you're going to want to have some privileges. You may want to have a user that has kind of some super privileges, but you pretty much never want to have that user be the one that you enter in here, because you don't want, even if someone gets your username or your database name, your username and password, you still want to put some things in place so there's really not much they can do to harm your database even if they get it. The easiest way to do that is to work with privileges. So for example, this particular script here, it doesn't need all of the privileges. So pretty much all it needs is the create, the alter, the insert, and when we get into displaying data, the select. Okay, so it'll allow it to create you to create databases, tables, or indexes, allow you to alter tables, allow you to insert data, and then allow you to select data. It won't allow you to drop, which is delete a database or table. It won't allow you to delete tables or data, and so you only need to give that user those certain privileges. And so one of the best things that you can do for security is to not give all privileges to every user, but instead look at what your script really needs as far as privileges, and then only give it those privileges. And also when you're writing your script, think about this in advance and write it so you don't have to give that many privileges. So Now, of course, if you're doing stuff where someone can delete data from your database, then you may need to give it the delete and or the drop, although probably rarely the drop. But you may need to give it the delete so that they can delete information from the database and things like that. Although it's typically better to have everything just stay stored in the database and have a switch, so when they hit delete in your script, it doesn't actually delete it. It just triggers it just triggers an option in your database that tells the script not to display that information or whatever. That's one thing that you can really do. But again, using these privileges creatively, using them responsibly is one of the best ways that you can protect your database. So again, look at that when you're writing your scripts and think about how you can do that. Now, beyond that, then we can get into some stuff that you can actually do in your code to help protect your database. And so kind of the main philosophies that are out there as far as protection fall into 4 main categories, which is whitelisting, blacklisting, format detection, and format correction. So whitelisting is a lot like what we did with the domain here, where we set what domains can have access to be able to use this form. So we put those domains on a whitelist, and only the domains on the whitelist are able to access and use the form. Okay, so that's an example of whitelisting. You could do that in all different kinds of ways, but it involves knowing what things, what domains, what can access your script, and only giving those things access. And that kind of goes back to what we talked about with the user privileges for the MySQL. Only giving whitelisting the privileges essentially, and only allowing the privileges that the script needs. So that's an example of whitelisting. That's one philosophy. Of course, blacklisting is the exact opposite. Knowing what domains, what things you don't want to have access to your script, and blocking those. So typically blacklisting is not, I'm not going to say it's always a bad idea, but typically it is, simply because you just never know. And a lot of times you can put in a blacklist item or do something to blacklist, and it ends up causing unintended consequences to where people who should be able to use your script can't. So typically it's better to whitelist than it is to blacklist. But you can use blacklisting. You've probably seen that where a lot of scripts will have a place where you can blacklist IP addresses. So that's one example of doing that. Format detection. So let's go to our form, and let's say that the format pretty much for the name. You know that there shouldn't be any numbers in that, because it's a name. Names don't have numbers for the most part. And even if it does, it's typically not necessary. So you can eliminate numbers from there. You can eliminate probably things like an and sign, a dash, parentheses, things like that, certain special characters. There's probably some you might want to leave. But you can go through and you can determine what format this should be in, and then detect, or even beyond that, this should be a variable character. It should just be alphanumeric. Really, this one should be alphanumeric plus the @ sign and a dot, maybe a dash or an underscore, a few special characters. This one should be pretty much a little more variable, a little more open. This one, exactly what it's going to be because you've set the option, so it's all alphanumeric. So that's all it should be. The same thing with this one. And again, all your input boxes on your form, you're going to have a general idea what kind of format they should be in. Should they be a text? Should they be alphanumeric? Should they be special characters? Should there be no special characters? Should it be kind of variable and a little more open? And then you can have your script actually detect if the information that was input into this box is that format. And if it's not, then you can keep it from processing through. You can throw an error that says, it's in the wrong format. You need to fix this, this, and this, and not allow those characters to be inserted into your database and maybe be malicious code. So that's format detection. And then the last one is format correction, and that's kind of what we did here with this fclean function here. Is essentially, again, as we talked about earlier, it uses this function called MySQL real escape string. And if you look that up in the PHP manual, it'll explain exactly what it does, but essentially escapes all potentially malicious characters, so that those characters can't be harmed. And in case you don't know, in PHP, escaping is putting a forward slash in front of it. And what that forward slash tells PHP is not to render it, not to process it, but to just output it literally. And so when you output it literally, it stops PHP from executing it essentially, or processing it. So it renders it dormant essentially. So anyway, that's essentially what this function does, is it corrects the format. So it adds slashes to the input in order to correct the format in case there's format in there that you don't want. So, and then of course, when you pull it back out, then there's things you can do to get rid of those slashes, because obviously you don't want that displaying on your site. So there's things you can do to then clean it back out as it comes out. But again, this would be an example of format correction. Okay, so those are kind of some of the main philosophies. Now, I could stop there, but I really want to kind of go beyond and show you two tools that you can use to kind of really take the idea of security to the next level very, very easy. Now, as you know, probably know by now, I'm all about you writing your own code, you learning how to code, you learning the reason behind it. But I will say that there are certain instances where using existing code may be the way to go. And when it comes to forms, especially when you're starting out, or even as you get down the road a little bit, there's code out there that is well written, that's well supported, that can really help you, so you don't have to kind of recreate the wheel. You can use code that's available out there to help you with that. And so I'm going to show you two such examples. And the first one that we're going to talk about is what's called this VDaemon. And what VDaemon is it's really just a validation class in PHP, and its sole job is to validate data. Okay, so if you go to x-code.com, and I'll go ahead and do this for you. So www.x-code.com, and you see this VDaemon products right here. You go here, and as you scroll down, you can kind of see here it says starting from version 3.1, VDaemon is available under a free license. So this is actually a free class that you can download and use for validation. And you're also able to redistribute it. So it's actually included with the distribution of this form script that you're going to be getting with this course. So you can go ahead and download that, though, if you want to use it for other stuff. And essentially, you upload it pretty much anywhere on your server. And we're going to go. This is the folder for this form script, and I just made an external lib folder. If you open that, I put the VDaemon folder in here, and then here's all the VDaemon files. So pretty much all you got to do is just put it in there and upload it, and it's good to go. You don't have to tweak any of the files or anything like that. So you can download that here, and then it has a nice user guide that walks you literally step by step through installing it and using it. And we're going to cover it a little bit there. And then one of the things that you're going to use inside are these tags to add validation checks to certain inputs. Okay, so this has a nice explanation of all the different tags that you can use, what they do, how to use them, etc., etc. So this is very, very well documented, well supported script. I highly recommend it, and it works well. So I'm going to come back actually over here to our form, and I've put on with VDaemon, I've made it so these two fields are required. Okay, so if I try and submit the form without it, you can see it doesn't let me submit the form, and it throws an error. Of course, all this is customizable. So it throws an error, says that I can't, you know, that these two things are required and I need to enter them. Okay, and of course I could do that for all of these. So that's one example. Now, making it required is just one of the things that you can do. You notice down here, there's all different types. You have this check type, so this is kind of a format detection type thing. A range, so if it's in with a certain range, you can compare it. Regular expressions, that's one that you'll probably use a lot. Format, and then you can create custom ones. You know, there's all kinds of things that you can check for in using these different validators, okay, to validate the data. So again, if it doesn't pass that, it won't let it through. Okay, so let's kind of go to the code, and I'll show you some of the things that I added. First off, you'll notice that on the form now, you'll need to have these couple things required. Of course, we have our VDaemon, and this is going to be the path to your VDaemon script, just like I said in our folder over here. You're going to put the path to this vdaemon.php file. And then this one's for the ReCAPTCHA, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then this one is the core, or the config file. And the reason we need to now include that is actually for the ReCAPTCHA for our public and private key. Okay, so these are some things that you need to are required when you put them in the form. They need to be right at the top here, just like this, and that'll just pull that in so that we can use that those functions, those variables, those constants in our form. So, but for this, we required the VDaemon script, and then we come down here, and there's a couple things you got to do. First, you got to give your form an ID. Okay. That just allows VDaemon to recognize the form. So you give it an ID, and then you add this run at, and you set that to VDaemon. That essentially tells it to process it through VDaemon before it passes it on to the next page. Okay. All right, you'll see this summary thing here. We'll come back to that in a minute. And you'll see that all I did then was add these different labels and this validator to these inputs. And this validator right here is actually what does the validation. So you give it a name. It can be any name. It just needs to be unique. And then the type. Okay, and that type is this one is required. Now, this may be a regular expression. It may be a format. It may be all of the different custom tags that you have down here. The type is required. Type is check type for the check type validator. It's range for the range validator. So it corresponds to what kind of validator it is. Okay, so you put that type in here. Control, this is the name of the input. So if we go over here to our input, we see that we named it name, because that's what we're asking for, is their name. So you use this control and say that this is basically this validator is being applied to this input. And then of course you can set a custom error message that will show up when the data isn't entered correctly. Okay, so that's really the validator. It's really simple to do. And if you come down here, you'll notice that we have another validator. Its name is unique. It's for input 2, but pretty much everything else is the same. It's required. Its control is email, because this is the email input, and then it just says your email is required. Okay, so that's what actually does the validation. The rest of all this is simply for displaying the error message. So this label, you'll see that I have wrapped around our label here, this label tag. Again, an error class, which is for the style sheet. You'll see the error class up here. And then your validators, again, this is going to correspond to this validator down here. Okay, so what that basically is telling VDaemon is when this validator returns invalid, then apply this label information here. Again, what input is it for? It's for the name one. And again, this error class control error. If we come back up here, we have that right here. Okay, so again, and it's the same for this down here. And it's just, again, changed to apply to this input here. And then of course this up here, this is a summary. This is what actually shows the errors messages up here. And so it's really, you pretty much just paste this code in here. Of course, you can change this header text right here to whatever you want it to be. You can give it a different class. You can format the class up here using CSS. But this is what actually allows that to display. So, and again, all this is explained step by step in their user guide, but I did want to run over a little bit. And so what that essentially does then is it exactly what you see here. It checks to make sure data is entered, and if it's not, it throws the errors. So now if we go back to our form and we go test, and we go test@test.com, and we submit, you'll notice now we get an error that says ReCAPTCHA. And ReCAPTCHA is the next one that I want to talk about. ReCAPTCHA is very, very powerful. Allows you, because you could have it to where you have VDaemon checking all your inputs, but you may have someone out there with a robot who goes through and just starts doing a bunch of spam registrations. Those registrations fit all the formats, but they're automated and they can do hundreds or thousands in a day or hour or whatever. And so you don't want that as well. So you need something like ReCAPTCHA to stop the spam registrations. So then I'm going to show you how to integrate ReCAPTCHA into the script. So first thing you need to do is you actually need to go to ReCAPTCHA, and you need to get a public and private key. So you come here and you enter in the domain. So whatever domain you want to, you're going to be using this script on, or this ReCAPTCHA on, you enter that here, you hit create key, and it will give you just this page right here, which is a public and private key. Okay. Now you come back over here to our config file and you enter those right in here. Okay. And those get saved as the constant R public and R private. Now we come over here to our process script, and essentially what it does is we first off, again, we have our config and our functions already included. We included VDaemon. We also include, again, this ReCAPTCHA lib.php, which is in our external lib file. So we include that. That allows all its functions to come in. And then you essentially, this code is given to you from ReCAPTCHA. So you can paste this code in right here. And what this does is there's this function that has the ReCAPTCHA check answer. So it's going to check the answer using your private key, the remote address, the challenge field, the response field, okay, which are posted. And again, that's just like your form. It's post data that gets passed through. So it's going to check that, and it's going to store it as a variable. And then down here, it's going to check that data and run it against this function is valid. So if it's, and this is saying if it's not valid, then kill the script and send in this error. So right here, you could do, I mean, you don't have to do this right here. You could redirect it back to the page it came from and pass all the data back to it. You could, you could tell it to log, the IP and different stuff like that, and then kill the script. All that really needs to happen is you need to do something when this response or this variable, this check, is invalid, because that means that the script or the code in this little box here was entered incorrectly. So you just do whatever you want with that. Of course, you're going to want to kill the script. You're not going to want to continue to process, but you can do other things with it as well. Okay, so it's really that simple. The only other thing that you really need to do, again, we go to our form and you include the ReCAPTCHA lib in that, and then you come down here to get the actual ReCAPTCHA to display on your form. Just wherever you want it to display, you put in this little code, PHP echo ReCAPTCHA get HTML. This R public is the public key. It's our constant, you remember, from our config file for R public. So that actually displays this form right here. Okay, and it's really as simple as that. So that's an easy way to add ReCAPTCHA to your site and keep spam registrations from happening. And of course, again, this is all, they have documentation on their site that explains all of this. So you don't have to feel like here's all the explanation of it. So it'll walk you through it. Again, don't be afraid to use this code. You don't have to paste it exactly as they have it in here. I mean, you need to paste each line, but not necessarily in the order that we have. You'll notice that I don't have it pasted exactly like they have it here. I have my require at the top. I didn't even set this key because I have it set as this variable because I had it set as a constant, and I just passed this constant in here. And again, this is the check to see if the what was submitted was valid, and you can do anything if it's not valid. So that's a couple powerful ways that you can, again, protect your pages or your form and the data that gets input into it using the VDaemon and the ReCAPTCHA. Of course, if you wanted to write your own, you could sure do that. Take a little more time, but it may be a little more customized to what you're looking for. And of course, you don't have to use ReCAPTCHA. There's other ones out there that you could use, although Google just took this one over. So that kind of gives it some credibility as far as how good it is. So anyway, I want to show you now, okay, that even despite all these checks, our form still actually works. So we got all this information, PHP, yes, and then hopefully I get this right. Sometimes these are hard to figure out. Submit it, and it says our information was submitted successfully. If we come to our database, we see we have our users table, which I changed that right here. Form ID users, that gives us our table name of users. And if we browse in there, you're going to see users, test at text area, PHP, yes. And one thing that you're going to, with the ReCAPTCHA, is that information is actually going to get passed too, because ReCAPTCHA uses post data just like your form does. So you're actually going to get your ReCAPTCHA data put in here. It's probably not really a big deal. You don't necessarily need it, although if you want to check it, you always could. But it is going to get put in there. So something to think about. Anyway, so you can see that the form still works despite all of our checks, as long as the data gets entered into it correctly. So again, lots that you can do in terms of security. You really need to stay on your toes as far as security goes. That's going to be one thing that people are going to look to you for as a developer. So get out there, research some of it. Again, the main things or the main philosophies are whitelisting, blacklisting, format detection, and format correction. And then, of course, we have this spam check as well. So that's security. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you in the next video.